Okay, looks like lots of you have been able to join us now, so I think we will make a start. So welcome to you all. Great to have so many of you on this webinar. Today we're going to be looking at integrating ArcGIS Pro into your web GIS workflows. Yeah, we're going through a workflow to incorporate that. Before we dive into all that we have to show you today, there's just a little bit about housekeeping to make you aware of how the webinar will run. So this webinar is being recorded, so feel free to take a look at the email that will come afterwards and have a look at the link there, and you'll be able to access the recording. In that follow-up email, there'll also be lots of useful resources related to this webinar that we've put together, so do keep an eye out for those links as well. As I mentioned, as a few of you were just joining in there, we do have a Q&A at the end, and we're running that through Slido. So do submit questions at any time throughout the webinar, and we'll be getting to answer those at the end. If you've not used Slido before, it works by upvoting questions that have already been submitted. So if you spotted a very similar question to what you were about to ask, then go and upvote the one that's already there, and basically that ranks them so that as we come to the Q&A, we'll get through the ones with the most upvotes first. Also within that Slido interface, you'll find a poll. So we always love to hear how you found a webinar, any thoughts and feedback as well. So do feel free to answer that poll at the end as well. To access Slido, you can scan that QR code that's on the screen just now, and that'll take you through to the Q&A section. If you're doing it in the browser instead, you can go to slido.com and then enter that events code there, and that'll also take you to the same place. So on the webinar today, you'll have myself, Rosie Gardner. I'm a GIS consultant here at Esri UK in the product communications team. And joining me is Matthew Aikman, and he is a GIS developer here at Esri. So what to expect? As I said, we're going to be looking at the integration between our ArcGIS Pro desktop environment and our online web environment as well. So we'll start off by looking at how you connect those two environments together. And then we'll be understanding how we bring data into Pro, analyze it and process it, and then collaborate with that web environment and how we can then push information out into the online area. And as I said, a Q&A at the end. For this webinar, we've decided to run through a scenario to help you piece together those different sections of a workflow and how ArcGIS Pro would fit in and how we'd use ArcGIS Online alongside that. So with that in mind, we're going to have a few different hats to wear. So we're going to start off working as a data curator and understanding the data we're going to be using. I'm then going to switch over to Matthew, who will be our GIS analyst and processing that information and working through how we analyze it. And then finally, we'll put on a third hat of the stakeholder engagement. And it's important we consider that to know how we're going to share our information out afterwards. So to begin, we're going to be wearing the data curator hat. And the question here is, how can I access the data that I need? How do I bring that down into our ArcGIS environment and work with it within Pro and then later on in online as well? And I just wanted to highlight that, you know, a whole host of you will be using lots of different types of data sets that are available in lots of different formats and in lots of different locations as well. So you could be using data that's locally stored, whether it's on a physical pen drive or on a shared network or working with databases within your organization. And then that works hand in hand with data that's online as well. So more often now we're seeing people host their data in the cloud, whether that's on your own systems or publicly available through agencies. And then also this thing called the Living Atlas, which you may or may not have heard of. We're going to touch on that in a bit more detail later on. But all these data sets can be used within the ArcGIS system. And I'm going to show you how you start to pull that through. So starting from the very beginning of a ArcGIS Pro workflow and how you get started with Pro. So I'm just going to go and find my Pro project and load up Pro. So searching on your system, and you get this window called initializing. And what that's doing is it's looking for a portal connection that allows me to connect in to my ArcGIS Online environment. If it hasn't found one, if you're not logged in already, you'll get a window that looks something like this. And you might have a username and password login, or you might be part of an organization that works with an organization URL. And at Esri UK, we have a URL, so I'm going to sign in with that. Once I'm signed in, it then continues initializing and finding that portal connection. And once successful, it then launches Pro for you. And the reason I wanted to highlight this is because up here in the top corner, that portal connection is now established, and this is how you connect the online and the desktop environments, and you can then work hand in hand and publish up when you need to. So from here you can launch a project. I've got one going already, and we can use Pro, if you're familiar with Pro, in exactly the same way, but knowing that you've got that portal connection for when you need it. And first off, I want to start my project by adding data in. And if I go to the top bar at the ribbon at the top here, we have this add data button. And on the little drop down arrow, we can then see lots of different ways to add data, whether it's browsing or from a URL, or even it might be that you have an Excel spreadsheet of points and then you can convert that table into a layer that way instead. Now, I'm going to be using data that I've already downloaded. So I've been to an online and I've found a shapefile and I've got it downloaded in my downloads. So I'm going to browse to that location within my project. So by clicking browse, I then have all these different locations I could have my data stored. I'm going to go into my projects, go to my downloads, and I'm just searching my computer. So this could be organization data that you have locally stored. And working with that scenario, we're going to be looking at wind turbines, and there's location and the site suitability of my wind turbines. So from here, I'm going to be pulling in lots of different data sets that make it useful to understand site suitability and locating where the best places are for our turbines. And this will then be used by our analysts. So to start with, I'm going to be using a shapefile. And this is telling me about the wind potential in Scotland. But I also want to understand other factors, things like location to roads and things like that. So I need to go over to find that information in the browser. And this is where the Living Atlas can come in handy. So it's not just using local organisation data, but I mentioned we have this resource called the Living Atlas, which has a whole host of data that people using ArcGIS have access to. And I always recommend that you browse this in the web viewer first and locate within here the data sets that you need, mainly because it has lots of detailed information for you. So I can go through these categories, I can search based on a region, or I can simply type in a name because I'm aware of one that I already want to use. So I'm going to go to OS Open Roads, and I can click through and find all that detailed information within the dataset pages. It's important to make a note of this and understand the dataset that you are using. But once you're happy and you've decided which one you want to make use of, you can take it directly from here and go down and take this service URL at the bottom. And by copying that, you can then go back into Pro, add data, excuse me, and add it from path. So if I just paste in that URL there, it recognizes it as a web service. I can click add, and it'll directly load that information into my project. So you can continue to build up this project and add lots of different data sets in and load up all the information that potentially an analyst later down the road in this workflow can then make use of. And once you've done that, once you're happy with the data sets you've got, you can then share that. So you can go to the share button at the top, and there's lots of different methods to share. And for myself, I'm going to make a project package. So I can click the project package icon there, run through the wizard and package all this information up to then be uploaded into our ArcGIS Online portal so that any other colleague can take this project, know that the data is all set up for what they need, and then continue with that workflow. So I'm now going to pass on this project with all its data in it to our data analyst, Matthew, who's going to be using ArcGIS Pro and showing you why it's important to use Pro in this case for the performance and the scalability, and also then at the end, automation as well. So Matthew, over to you.
Thank you, Rosie, and thank you for curating my data for me. So as Rosie said, I'm Matthew, usually a developer within the Esri UK research team, but today I'm going to be playing the role of a GIS analyst, so identifying the best places to be putting some wind turbines in Scotland. So Rosie's given me some criteria for this in the form of tasks. So this is just the panel you can see on the right. So really, we're just using tasks just to kind of communicate our workflow for this webinar. But if you'd like to learn a bit more about them, then there will be a link in the supporting material. And just apologies in advance, but I'm not going to be showing kind of each step of the workflow that I've used, but I am going to do the best to furnish you with some handy tips and tricks. So I'm going to be doing some things with the selection tool. I'm going to be doing a bit of elevation work, some stuff in Model Builder to show you how we can easily scale this workflow up. And of course, as the name of the webinar suggests, I will be showing my work to ArcGIS Online. But before I get going, I just wanted to touch on some of the user types. They're very topical at the moment, I suppose, but I'll just quickly go through what I'll be using for this. So for the basic functionality, so that's the tasks, so tasks on the right, the selection tool, model builder, and most of the analysis that I'm using today is from the creator user type, but I will call out in the task at the bottom here the user type that I've used for each step. But without further ado, let's start tackling some of these tasks. So firstly, I'm just going to drop that down. So firstly, I want to isolate just the parts of this WTSF data from the Scottish Government that Rosie's provided me. I just want to isolate the parts of this data that are the areas with potential, as I do, as you can see here, have kind of three types of land classification. So split into kind of areas where there is potential, as well as group 1 and 2, where there isn't. So I really just want these as kind of a separate layer. So for that, I can head into, with this selected in the contents pane, I can head into the select by attributes tool and just quickly build an expression that's going to allow me to select those areas with potential. So I want the field including the details, and then I want that to equal the area with potential. So if I click OK, we should now see that it's just those peachy areas, so the areas with potential, that have been highlighted. Now, to get that into a separate layer, I can just quickly right-click that in the contents, head down to selection, and then make a layer from that selected layer. Now it's carried across the symbology from kind of the layer it was selected from, but of course it won't have groups 1 and 2. I could resymbolize that, but for this, I'm just going to leave it how it is and collapse that. So the feature selection tool is really kind of powerful and really kind of quick to use. I particularly love it because it lets me be a bit lazy. So instead of creating a layer like I've just done there, I can miss out that step. So I'll show you in my next step. So if I just head along, I need to create an AOI. So here I need to um, kind of create an AOI that covers the southeast of Scotland local authority areas. So I can find that layer within here in my Living Atlas layer. So I've got, I think this is the GB layer for local authority areas. So as before, I just need to select that layer in the contents pane, select by attributes, and because I've run this one before, it stores my expression here. So all I need to do is just click OK, and we can see that those areas have been highlighted. So keeping these regions selected, because I really just want the outline of these. So keeping these selected, I can head into the geoprocessing tools and click, oops, not that one, this one. And then from here, I just need to set the input features to be that local authority boundaries layer, which is this one. And we can see here that it's carried across that selection. So it's only going to be running this, this tool on the selection. So I'll just give it a sensible name. Aggregation distance, I'll just 10 meters for the purpose of this. And then if I run that, I am getting a bit of a warning message because I have run this before, but it will just replace the original layer. So now we should see that I've got a nice clean outline for my area of interest. So with my area of interest created, I'm just going to head into the Environments tab, or the Analysis tab, and then down to Environments. So if you struggle with long wait times, then this is going to be one for you. So if I set my process and extent here, well, it's already been set to my to that layer, but if I reset that, this is what the default will look like. So it has no kind of process and extent. So that means that there is no kind of, I suppose, limit to the area that will be analyzed. But here I can set that to be my area of interest. And now all subsequent geoprocessing tasks for this project will only be running for this extent, which will really help to control my processing time. So just click OK here. So as I said, I'm not going to be going through all of the analysis that I've done here, but I will just touch on a few bits so you can see my process and extent in action. So I've created my AOI. So I'll just head along to the next step, which is buffering rivers and roads. And yes, we are still in the creator user type. So here, and I did do this before, I just created buffers for my 100-meter buffers for my roads and rivers, and then 2-kilometer buffers for my roads. So this was, I think this was a GB dataset. It's definitely larger than this area, but because I had my process and extent set for this process, it has only run it on the extent of my AOI. So if I just change the color of that quickly, you should see it a bit clearer. Just want a nice red outline. Never mind. But we can see if I just flick that off, that it has only run for that process and extent. So we can see, yeah, again, how that process and extent has worked its magic, but I don't really want to go too much more into the buffers, as I really want to touch on was some of the more complex analysis that we have at our disposal in Pro. So for this, I'm going to be jumping into the professional advanced user type, just to kind of demonstrate how in Pro we do have excellent generic data support, so lots of flexibility in the data we can pull in, but also in terms of what we can do with it. So with the OS Terrain 50 dataset that Rosie's provided me with, we have contours. I mean, it's a huge data set, and it really just looks like a solid block of color. But if you zoom in, you can see that those are actual contours. But in this kind of format, there's not a huge amount we can do with it in terms of analysis. So what I'm going to do is turn it into a raster and then hopefully open up a whole world of possibilities. So I'm just going to head into my history tab so that we can see all the processes that I've run for this project. And just to kind of turn these contour lines into a raster, it is using the topo to raster tool. So when I ran this, everything was just kind of left at default, other than kind of providing an output dataset name, which gave me this. So again, using that same process and extent, I've got a nice raster representation of the elevation in the southeast of Scotland. So here I can just do some spot checks and click around. It's selecting that because it's on top. So yeah, just do some spot checks and click around, and we can see that this is the pixel value is meters in elevation, so in height. So the light green represents a relatively low, or the darkest green would represent the lowest kind of segment of values, whereas the white would be the highest. So that's 750 meters. But now that this is in kind of raster format, we can do some cool stuff with it, like slope analysis. So for this, I was using the surface parameters tool. And again, I'm not an elevation expert, so I did just keep most of this as defaults, other than changing the parameter type to be slope and the measurement to be in degrees. So just running that will turn this into this. So now the pixel values, instead of representing height, are representing slope in degrees. So clicking around again, we've got a slope of 1.23 there, and then the darkest, which is going to be the steepest slopes, is about 12 and a half degrees there. But as the task says, we only want slope where there is less than 5.71 degrees. So how do we kind of, I suppose, do a kind of selection to find out the cells here that are below 5.71 degrees? Well, because it's raster, we can't use the selection tools, but what we can do, and I've done it here, is use the extract by attributes tool. And I mean, the interface does look very similar. All it does extra is kind of work on a raster and then create an output layer, so an extra layer. So I've just defined my expression here. So everything which is less than 5.71 degrees, which outputted this. So we can see if I just flick that bottom layer on and off, that it's taken out all those cells where that value was greater than 4.71. Great. So we've calculated the slope, but we also need to return a feature layer highlighting areas where slope is less than 5.71 degrees. So again, I'll show you in my history. So we're looking for a raster to polygon. So this just converts it from a raster keep that there. Converts it from a raster into a polygon. Quite a simple tool, and I've chosen to simplify my polygons here just because I'm not too interested in the granular details of the boundaries, which gives me this. So that is all of the geoprocessing that I wanted to cover, but I did do some more just for full transparency to get my final output, which I'll show you in a minute. So I wanted to get the WTSF areas with potential minus my 100-meter river and road buffers, because I'm not interested in putting wind turbines within 100 meters of rivers and roads, which gave me, and I'll head into my buffer analysis, which gave me my WTSF areas minus roads and minus rivers. So we can see here that it's cut out my buffers from that WTSF layer. So that's that. And then finally, all I did was to kind of perform pairwise intersect, which again heads back into the creator user type. So using intersecting the WTSF areas with potential, that's this one minus the roads and rivers, with the roads 2 kilometer buffer, because I am interested in putting turbines within 2 kilometers of a road, but then intersecting that again with my slope polygon. So places where slope is less than 5.71 degrees. So without further ado, here is the final output. So we've managed to localize quite a bit the areas with potential to make it suit this kind of southeast Scotland context. So one of the last things I wanted to do was to share this up with Rosie, because I think she does have some other plans for it. So just, sorry, in the contents pane, just heading to your layer, right clicking that and sharing as a web layer. And because I'm logged into ArcGIS Online, this is just spending a little moment connecting with that. So I'll just give it a name, potential turbine areas. You can give it a summary. This is a terrible summary. And you can give it some tags so that you can search for it within your organization. But then what I really wanted to show was the fact that I have created a group for this whole project, for this kind of fictional wind turbine analysis project. So I can just share this layer with that wind farm site suitability group. So I'll just analyze this. I'm probably going to get an error. Yeah, so I'm just getting a unique numeric IDs, not a signed error, which is easy to resolve. So just click on those three dots. I can auto assign some IDs, click analyze again, and then publish that one up. So that should be shared with Rosie in a moment. So we have now finished our tasks, which gives me a little bit of time now to chat through how with Pro we can scale this workflow up. So I'll just get rid of my tasks now. So we can scale this up with Model Builder. So for those of you that haven't worked with Model Builder, it's a nice way in which we can kind of chain different geoprocessing tasks together, and really powerful for scaling up and repeating workflows. So it looks a bit like this. So this is the workflow for everything that I've just shown you. So I'll zoom in a bit. We can see here's my elevation work. And if I just click on these, we can see that they are just geoprocessing tools chained together. It's got the same parameters that I ran before. And I'll just head into this, make sure I'm panning. And we can see here is where I created my area of interest uh, with my expression for the southeast of Scotland, and then my aggregate polygons tool that gave me my nice clean boundary. So, I mean, if I was to just run this workflow again, I could just click run, and then it would go through everything that I've just shown you without me kind of being hands-on with it. Now, looking at this, you might be a bit daunted by the prospect, but it's easier to get into than you think. So I'll show you how I got into it. So once you've explored a workflow that works for you and you've run the geoprocessing tools, you can then see these, and I've been here quite a bit throughout this workflow. You'll then see your tools in the history tab. So and I suppose a bit unlike your kind of browser history, this isn't read-only. You can go into these and interact with them. But one of the great things about it is that if I create a new model just up there, I can literally just drag these tools into Model Builder. So this was my tool for let's see. Yeah, my tool for selecting the southeastern local authority areas of Scotland, and then just doing my aggregate polygons tool, and it will automatically do a link. It's not always the right link, so it's best to just check this, because at the moment this aggregate polygons tool is running on the national dataset rather than my sub-selection of it. But to fix that, I can just drag that over, change that to be the input features, and I'll just run this quickly so you can see AOI from Model Builder, validate that quickly, and then run it. And we can see that's done. It hasn't added it to my map, but if I just head into my geo database and refresh that, it hasn't stored it there. Or has it stored it? Oh well, it's put it somewhere, but I think it's about time we moved on. So kind of with this model, with my national data sets, I could just change the project area and kind of run this model for any region where I need to do future analysis. But for now, let's see what Rosie thinks of my analysis. I'm sure she's got some extra plans with it. So Rosie, back to you.
Thank you, Matthew. So we've gone through and taken that data and now used it to form analysis and got a really useful layer out of it to understand potential locations for wind farms based on those criteria that Matthew's run through. So the final step is to share that out to those who need to use it. And it's really important to consider your audience when you've got to the end of a workflow in terms of, do you need to further collaborate with other members of your team or third parties? Or is it more that you need to share your outputs out so that others can consume them, maybe sharing it with members of the public or beyond your organization? So to do so, we need to go and find that layer that Matthew has shared into the group in our ArcGIS Online account. So to get to ArcGIS Online, you want to go and find ArcGIS Online in the browser. And so you can go to arcgis.com and it'll take you to a page that looks something like this. And then you want to sign in using the same credentials that you were using before in Pro. So it could be those username and password, or as I did before, my Esri UK URL. Sign in, looks very similar, but this time it's taken to our online portal and we get a view that looks something like this. And the main thing to take note of is this ribbon at the top here, and particularly the groups ribbon in this case, or your content if you published it directly to yourself. But we're going to go to groups because Matthew shared it via a group. And as Matthew said, groups are a great way of breaking down kind of projects and making sure you're sharing data with those who need it, but not necessarily having to share it to your whole organization. So there's a little button here to create a group, so you have the control to create groups, or you can access groups that someone has added you to. So I can go and find that wind farm group that Matthew has, and I can view its details. And in here, I'll then be able to see the layer that has been shared to it. So this is the one shared today, 25th of July. And from here, I can click through and then view it like other layers we saw earlier, like the ones in the Living Atlas, similar structure. We could start to populate out a description, give it a summary or a more detailed summary to Matthew's, etc. But you can directly then open this in the online environment. So I can click and open it in my map viewer. And it might be from here that I want to continue building up this map. So I've now got this data set, but I might want to add a few others, enrich that picture. Or it might be that I want to share it in different formats. So first off, I want to make sure I save and save it as a map. Give it a title. You can choose a folder to save it into if needs be, fill out the metadata and hit save. And by doing so, I could then share this exact map with other people, and I can go into the share map options and choose the level of detail that I'm sharing it to. So whether it's just purely myself at the minute or broadening that out to the whole organization, beyond the organization with this everyone option, or to a specific group again by using the group sharing. But this interface is quite complex. You've got all the details of the map viewer. So if you're wanting to share it beyond, so you're not going to collaborate anymore, but you're wanting to push it out as maybe in a report or embed it in a website, you want to maybe remove all these buttons and just share it as a simple map viewer. So to do so, you might then go in and create an app and use one of these different templates in here to click through and follow the structure to then build up a map, pick a particular template of interest, so maybe the basic template. And this way you've got your same map, but now without all those buttons and just simple options like zooming in and viewing the legend, etc. So once your data is in online, you then have a wealth of capabilities in here that allow you to do that sharing and collaboration with others. So to show that integration between those different environments, we've been using this wind farm development scenario to show you how you can bring data into the system and those different types of data sets that we've used, signing into your ArcGIS Online portal, inputting and then packaging up that data set so the analysts can perform their analysis, repeat it and scale it if needs be to different areas. And then finally, we finish with the stakeholder side of the workflow. So making sure you have the resources needed to push out your information to the appropriate audiences, whether that's to collaborate and use the same version of that data in lots of different ways in lots of different parts of your organization, or pushing it out to the public as well and being able to just view and interact with your maps and data that have been outputted. So that brings us to the end and to the Q&A. Before we get to the Q&A and all the questions that have been coming in, this is part of a series of webinars. So if you've enjoyed this one, then the next one will be next month on the 22nd of August, and building on that online story. So looking into how you can do web editing in the online ArcGIS environment. So do take a note of that date if you are interested in the next webinar. But yes, we're now going to take a few minutes to do the Q&A. So I can see questions have been coming in, which is great. But take note of that Slido. If you do have questions, feel free to continue to submit them and we will get through as many as possible. Matthew, are you there? Is there a question to
I
kick off with?
am, Rosie, and I do have a first question that I can take. So someone has asked how much of this would/wouldn't be possible with ArcGIS Pro Basic. So, I mean, when we talk about kind of Pro, there's kind of ArcGIS Pro Basic is included in the creator user type. So everything I did there that required the creator user type is using ArcGIS Pro Basic, which I suppose is now kind of the old terminology. So everything in there except for the elevation work that I was doing, which requires the GIS Professional Advanced user type. So yeah, everything in there was using the creator user type, so kind of the old ArcGIS Pro Basic version. So that's that one.
Okay, the next one coming up is using those WMS files means you cannot perform any geoprocessing on them, right? Um, so correct in the sense that WMS files, they don't allow geoprocessing, but a lot of data coming from Living Atlas does because it's directly compatible with Pro. So for instance, the OS roads, we could run buffers on them, so run geoprocessing on those. So it's not a blanket yes or no necessarily. Living Atlas data, a lot of them do allow geoprocessing, which is a great kind of perk to using them really. So that's that one.
And then we've got, can you create a task workflow directly from the geoprocessing history? No, I don't think so. I think it's just from it's just with Model Builder where you've kind of got that ability to drag um, drag your previous geoprocessing tasks into that model. I don't know if there's anyone else on the Esri UK side that knows differently. So yeah, I'll just answer that.
Hey Matthew, sorry, it's Alistair. I thought I'd just jump in on the tasks. With tasks, you can embed geoprocessing, either individual geoprocessing tools or even run models from within a task as part of the workflow. There's a bit more information about that in a blog that we'll share as a follow-on resource. I haven't double-checked whether or not you you know the nice thing when you kind of go back into your history is you're accessing all the parameters and things that you've used before. I don't know if that will carry into a task, so whether you can kind of directly reference that from a task, but it would be relatively straightforward to bring up, use the history to bring up a set of parameters and carry those over into your task if you're looking to automate it further that way. And there are great tool tasks for sharing workflows, so definitely worth a look.
Thanks, Alistair.
I'll take the next one. So, will there be a workshop on using ArcGIS Enterprise webhooks and Power Automate? So there's no explicit plans to create a workshop for that topic, but it's really great to have that as a suggestion. And if there's interest for that, then we can take that away. Something that we'll also do is take a look at some learning resources that we can ping in the resources email at the end as well. So yeah, we'll take that as an idea. Thank you very much. I'll take the next one as well. So does accessing the Living Atlas use service credits? It does not. So accessing it, you can use it to your heart's content and use those layers.
And for the next one, Rosie, I can pick that one up. So do the members of groups need to be ArcGIS license holders? So yeah, to a group as a kind of sharing model is relies on people being users within that ArcGIS organization. So you need to have a portal identity. And the difference there is that, you know, anytime you want to be able to check who is accessing your application or your data, you know, that's the point at which they need to have that identity. One of the nice things that you can do with groups is that, as well as sharing within your organization in a more limited way, so a subgroup of your kind of whole user community. You can also use groups as a mechanism for securely sharing between organization accounts. So if you've got collaborators that have a different ArcGIS online account, if you create a group, you can set them up so that you can invite external people as well. So that's something that as an organization you have that option to allow, and that can be a nice way of sharing, of kind of collaborating between different organizations, but still with that same level of security that you get by just sharing at the group level. And I'm also happy to carry on and pick up the next one as well, actually, because this is something that I've used a little bit in the past. Model Builder allows you to chain a set of geoprocessing tools together, like Matthew showed, and that brings together the individual steps of a workflow and allows you to run it as a single block. And there are then the kind of different things that you can do with that. That's something that you can share with other people in your organization. So once you've created your workflow using a model, you can make that available and other people can then run it as you would any other geoprocessing task. Then the difference with the pro tasks themselves is that they allow you to mix both running something like geoprocessing elements and models with manual tasks. So if you want to be able to run the model for a particular area, you could have a task where the first task says, zoom to the area of interest and kind of select the particular polygon that you want to work with. So you can have a manual element to it, but still provide that kind of guidance and make sure people follow a particular sequence. So you can have a mixture of both manual and semi-automated elements in there as well. So they're quite flexible.
Thanks, Alistair. I'm happy to take the next one. So, are there any resources for learning how to manage metadata on Pro for publishing to portals? Seems confusing as there is items and layers. So yes, you're correct in the sense that there are different ways to add your metadata. And there's a specific section in our Introduction to ArcGIS Pro training course that is all about metadata. So it might be worth exploring that course and seeing if that's something for you, where it's gone into detail. That's that one.
Do you want me to take the next couple around the kind of licensing and the roles? I'm happy to do that. So as Matthew was talking about the new user type, the new user type support, I guess they have a kind of fairly direct correlation with the sort of what you might understand in terms of the existing terminology. So at a creator user type, you now have access to ArcGIS Pro Basic, and then the GIS Professional maps to Pro Standard and Professional Plus to Pro Advanced. There is documentation, there's a matrix that kind of goes through the different elements of Pro, and that goes right down to the individual geoprocessing tool level, so you can see which geoprocessing tools are available at which of those license levels. You'll also see it if you go into the documentation, into the help files for an individual geoprocessing tool. It will also tell you in there exactly which of the license levels that tool is available at, and so you should be able to access that information either at that kind of big picture level using the matrix, or if there's a particular tool that you want to look at, you can get to it that way. And then the other question that was around user types was we might have accidentally kind of implied that you can switch user type while you're working. That's not the case. So your user type is set by the administrator for your portal. It's possible to change. If you're kind of working on things and you need a different level of capability, and that's available to your administrator as one of the user types that's in your particular account, they're able to make that change, but it's an administrative level function in your portal.
Okay, we are over time, but maybe we take a couple more and then finish there. So there's one there about in AGOL groups sharing maps with non-GIS colleagues. Can I direct them so that they just see the maps and do not see all the layers in the contents? So this is all about how you set up the various settings within your group. So you will be able to use those groups and share the specific layers that you want them to see. But you will need to have the same permission set on the maps and the layers. So if you have the layers shared only to yourself, then they will get an error when they're viewing the map. So you will have to share either the layers at organization level, so not necessarily just with the group, or you will have to share the layers with the group as well so that they can have access to all that content. So yeah, you just have to have consistency in how you're sharing those different items with that specific group.
On that question about model size, I've actually just posted a reply on it as well, Rosie in the background, but there isn't a recommended size for a model. Some analysis workflows do get large and complicated, and one of the things that I found useful in the past for kind of for sort of coping with that and for maintaining it is if you can break that model down into a set of logical submodels, you can actually reference those in a kind of an overarching model. So you might have a kind of model that's then running a set of submodels, and that makes it a little bit easier to see what's going on within those. So you can kind of split out an element and have that as a kind of actually manage it as a submodel, just so you don't end up with quite such a large and complex looking model on your screen to kind of thread your way through. So that can be a good way of managing that.
Perfect. Just the last one that I want to cover off, because I think it's quite key, is the question here about which portals should a user be logged into via to successfully load the Living Atlas. Should it be Enterprise or AGOL? So it's a really good point to raise. We've been using ArcGIS Online within this webinar. So ArcGIS Online will always have access to Living Atlas, and you'll be able to access it the way I have done, or within Pro. Enterprise, it depends on the configuration and the deployment of your enterprise. So if your enterprise is connected to the browser and can connect to the internet, I should say, then you will have access to Living Atlas. If you have an offline enterprise deployment, then you'll find that the Living Atlas connections will be disabled. So you won't be able to access Living Atlas, and you'd have to consume it via a different method by taking it offline and then bringing it in that way instead. So really good point to raise, and something to bear in mind if you are working on an offline enterprise deployment. We are massively over time, so I think we'll call it a day there on the Q&A. But thank you so much for your engagement and your involvement. I hope you found that useful. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. And in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day.